keep on, keep going.
See, the conversation that doesn't want to be validated is, we fought for centuries to be accepted in a land that never valued us, but allowed us. You used our gifts and talents and made a mockery of us, but never developed us. Community unity was labeled as terrorist schools, successfully infiltrated and ultimately dismantled by COINTELPRO. As a people, we endured abuse, sexual assault. We were taken away from our families, we were lynched, and most importantly, stripped away from our spirituality. We were given an identity and a name that didn't represent who we were. Through all the years of trauma, we still rise. We push through the educational barriers that was not afforded to us. See, they don't understand there's no stopping our progress. Despite we got to keep going. Through the police brutality, through the broken system that incarcerated people of color at a higher rate than any other race. We got to keep going. My kings and queens, look at us. They can't stop our progress.
We've been tested and rested and stamped off for most of our lives. Been beaten, mistreated, and murdered, unjustified. Black men, keep going.
Keep going, keep growing. Resilient man, keep showing up. Your presence is the potion. Your focus is the target. Magic man, keep sowing seeds into your future. Don't bargain with the beggars brought in. Make them binge watch your growth from the sideline. Big energy, keep choosing to be chosen. Keep the gift, take it off safety. Wave it in their faces, keep elevating. Without permission, keep being the promises of our ancestors and the dreams of our children. Keep defying odds, keep going hard. Keep believing God, keep breathing through the fall. Don't
I know that no
stop.
one can bring back all of the tears you cried. Just know that you got the power to take back what's deep inside.
Black woman, keep glowing, keep pouring, keep watering these lands with the drip of your melanin. Keep demanding your appreciation. Keep it at a distance from those who waste it. Keep your worth up. Keep birthing love and other multiplying things. Keep that dust off of your beautiful wings. Follow that which seems to you in bold true. Keep your lens locked on the light. Reach for it with your whole life. Submit to what you know is right. Don't think twice. No second guessing. You are the blessing. You are the message.
Wild. Ooh, then where you come from? Yes, it is not, yeah. Here's a chance to make it, yeah. If we focus on our goals, you can dish it, you can take, yeah. Just remember that you've been told it's a different world. It's a different world. Hey, then where you come from?
Good evening, and welcome once again to We Rise Podcast. I'm T. Wood Fair, your host and president of the Urban League of Greater Miami. And as we always say at the beginning of the show, if you want the rest of your life to be the best of your life, then you've got to live the rest of your life like colored people live the worst of their life. I thought about that saying over and over as I attempted to get ready for today's podcast. We created a flyer that said, if you thought slavery was bad, you ain't seen nothing yet. And that came to me as I was trying to decipher whether or not the things that we were proposing to do on behalf of the children in the village made sense as we come out of the pandemic. Should we still be focused on achievement? Should that focus be based on our ability to involve parents aggressively? Should we organize the parents to be the advocates for their children, equip them with the know-how and the emotional wherewithal to confront the system for change, not being combative, but being very, very vocal, not calling names, but designing and offering solutions? Are those the things that we should be focused on? And my answer, since I'm the architect of what it looks like in response to those conditions on behalf of the Urban League, was yes, that's where we should be. But then I had to look at the environment. I had to face up to whether or not the community at large, the institution of education in particular, but more importantly, the adults to whom the children belong to. Are they ready to go forward? I think they are. But I think that there are new odds before them that if we don't face up to them, then they will not be able to be as aggressive as they ought to be, simply because of the fact that they will not understand the new dynamics. All of our reaction has been to COVID-19, and I think that reaction is appropriate because all of us, individually, collectively, have had some relationship, some reaction to the vaccine and to the virus. We have been in all kinds of camps as to whether or not we should or should not take it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's a debate. Once again, there should not no color, but is always the case for America. We will figure out how to make everything black or white. We find it very difficult simply just to be human. And somehow we think that we have an edge one way or the other if we stay in the vein of that which is white, that which is black. At the end of the day, we all are the same. We may be different on the outside, but we have the same kinds of insides. We respond to life's challenges not based on our own color, but based on our own experiences and our beliefs, not in others all of the time, but in our own self-worth. And the current set of circumstances is no different. We are at a moment in our life where, in my judgment, things are going to be worse than ever before. As an 82-year-old colored man, born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, in a segregated environment, where the segregation did not have the ability to reach me because my parents protected me from it. So I did not experience it until I was in undergraduate school. And we started demonstrating in response to the quote unquote civil rights movement. A group of students, for those of us who are historians, sat down at a lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, led by the infamous Jesse Jackson. And they decided that they were not going to move until they were served. And as is the case of human behavior, we around the country, we meaning students, so that happened, and we decided that we would behave accordingly. So down the road, 41 miles away, at Johnson C. Smith University, I was a sophomore, and because of whatever it was, I became one of the leaders of that same movement in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was about black and white and black, right versus wrong. It was about simply us and them. And for those of us who want to be, quote unquote, civil rights historians, who know all the things that went on, and those of us who think we know all of the things that went on, simply because somebody told us, but they didn't know what they was telling you, and therefore you may not have it correctly. We saw that the enemy was slavery fallout, that white folks still were treating us differently because of the color of our skin. And that was true. But in slavery, many of those who looked like us figured out a way to survive, were able to manipulate the hostilities, the disenfranchisement, the brutality that was associated with being part of that slave system simply because of the color of their skin. And for those of us who are simply the scholars who have studied the history of slavery, know that all of us did not have the same attitude about being confined. We all know about Harriet Tubman, who had the Underground Railroad, who took us out of slavery into freedom land, and made it possible for us to understand that there was a way out. But never forget, Harriet Tubman said that I could have freed 10,000 more if I could just have convinced them that they were slaves. So there is a human behavior of survival called adaptation, that even when things are the worst, many of us are forced psychologically to survive simply by adapting and finding the best in the worst. I don't know whether or not there's going to be much best in the current worst that we're going through as we prepare for the next stage of the pandemic called inflation, called socialism. In slavery, there were many who decided that if they were going to be slaves, they simply had to figure out how to survive better than the average slave survived in the slave posturing of behavior at that time. So we saw a division, the field Negro and the house Negro. We saw a division that was really crafted along color lines. And if you look at the old movies, you will notice that most of the house Negroes were close to being like the folks who owned the house in terms of complexion. If you look at the field Negroes, they were most like the folks who were being denied because of the color of their skin. So a distinction, a differentiation was really crafted based on skin color. And we carried that over from slavery to our own socialization process once we became free. I can recall when I was in high school, as handsome and debonair as I was, best dresser, all of the above, best dancer, all of the above, a scholar, smart, all of the above. But there were girls who simply, in spite of all of those credentials, wouldn't allow me to carry them to the prom because I was too dark. So we carried those elements of differentiation based on skin color, not based on competency, from slavery into our everyday life. So we worked it out. It didn't matter. At the end of the day, there was somebody, in spite of their color and in spite of mine, who wanted to be seen with old T. Willard, who was the best dancer and had the car and had the money and had all of the other things that one needed. So I found out that you can overcome what other people think about you if you simply believe that what they think about you is what they think about you, and that you really don't give a damn what they think about you, because at the end of the day, it's what you think about you. And when you think about you in a very positive way, then you can overcome any negativity of others. But I don't think that's going to work in the next 10 to 15 years as we come out of this mess that we currently are in. I think that color will be insignificant, but because of the condition, both physically and mentally, that we were in, how we come out of it is going to be uniquely, once again, disproportionately bad for us. And that's what frightens me. It's a series of things that are happening in the larger community called America. There is a political war going on between the rich and the powerful. To be very clear, this is not about race. This is not about gender. This is not about religion. This is about the rich and the powerful. It's about those who want to maintain what they have and get more of what they desire. And they are willing to make whatever sacrifice they have to make in order to make that a reality. Therefore, they have a plan. Just as they had a plan to sustain segregation and racism, in my judgment, they have a plan. You may tell us that we cannot have slaves, and we will fight you for the right to have slaves. We will fight you. We will give up everything that we believe in. We will sacrifice our children. We will sacrifice our material possessions. We will do whatever we have to do because we believe that slavery is important to us. And we will fight and die for it. And they did. And they lost. And then they said, well, we still believe that we are superior. And as a result of that, while we lost the war, we must creatively design a system that will allow us to still carry out our beliefs and maintain our work of superiority. And this system was segregation. That you go over there, I go over here. You live there, I live here. You go to that school, I'll go to that school. You can stand up and take out, I can sit down and enjoy. So we will modify slavery into segregation and make that acceptable. And we know that from 1619 all the way up until 1864, segregation was the rule of the day. to the extent that we became very comfortable with it. Because once again, even though it was segregation versus slavery, we still had value. We still had worth. We still had an opportunity to survive because we were needed. We had value. We had worth. We had an opportunity to survive because we were needed. Suggest to you that as we enter into 2022, it's not going to be the case. I suggest to you that there are things going on in our environment that if those of us who understand it don't do something about it, then what we're getting ready to experience is going to be greater than slavery ever was. We're now getting ready to experience once again an environment where you have no worth. An environment where you have no worth. We don't care whether or not you are educated. We don't care whether or not you have children in wedlock or out of wedlock. We don't care whether or not you die of the virus or live through the second shot. We don't care if you finish school, if you ever attend school, because you see, we got somebody in town to take your place. The most frightening thing that's going on in our environment right now is what's happening at the border, where we are every day letting in tens of thousands of persons who are going to create a new set of quote unquote victims that can be manipulated as we were manipulated prior to integration. Several years ago, then just started. But here is a piece that back in 1980, in response to the influx of Cubans and Haitians into the country, when Congress for the first time wanted to talk about granting amnesty to legal and illegal aliens. And I decided that this would not be in the best interest of Black America. And based on that decision, I began to look at the influx and the impact from that vantage point. Everybody who knows me knows that I am not anti anybody coming to America. Everybody who knows me knows that I could care less as to whether or not you were Haitian, Jamaican, from Georgia, Mississippi, or from Nigeria. Everybody who knows me knows that I'm only unabatedly pro everything that's in the best interest of providing a solid foundation for a quality future for the children in the village. So in 1980, when the Merida boat lift started and 180,000 people began to come to America from Cuba, and another 25,000 escaping from Duvalier came from Haiti. I, like everybody else, responded to their coming. In fact, we did more than normal agencies in that response. We embraced those new residents to South Florida because the Urban League's mission is to improve the living and working conditions of Black people and other minorities. So there was no way that we could deny the execution of that portion of our mission simply because of the fact that those new people were not born, educated in Liberty City, Black Grove, Opelika, and other places where colored people live. So we made those adjustments. It was part of our Christian philosophical agency responsibility to do that. And we made it very clear that we were prepared to do what we had to do in order to welcome our sisters and brothers who came to us under the most difficult set of circumstances, who had gone through their slavery, like our forefathers had gone through their slavery, who had an opportunity to come to America on a different set of circumstances, through a different way than my forefathers did. But we made our adjustments. We were the first agency in this town to amend our service description to include Blacks and other minorities, which allowed us then to legitimately, according to our IRS designation, serve Blacks and Cubans. We were the first agency to also create special programs in response to special conditions that Cubans were experiencing because they were not being received with open arms. And if anybody knows the feeling of that emotion, where you think that you are equal, where you believe that you are equal, where you're in a country which says that you are equal, but the folks who don't look like you don't treat you like you're equal, that it makes you feel like you're still back where you came from. So we made sure that we reached out. We were the first agency to have Black folks working with Hispanic folks on our staff. I had the first Cubans in a Black agency in Liberty City. We were the first agency to respond to the hostilities and the degradement that was coming from Miami Beach High and other schools as they were expelling Hispanic students on the grounds where they didn't speak English and I didn't understand what they were doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we created a street academy for Hispanic students who were being expelled for frivolous reasons, like they expelled Black students for frivolous reasons. And this street academy was on Southwest 8th Street, and it was operated by a full-fledged staff of Hispanics who wanted to work to make sure that their kids had the same kind of opportunity that we had. We made sure that we had a relationship with the Cuban leaders at that time, Raul Masvidal, Dr. Bernard Benez, Amanda Cardina. We worked those relationships to the extent that they became so appreciative of what we were doing, they wanted to create their own Cuban Urban League. And we said, no, that's not the case. We think that you should survive, you should thrive based on your own organization, and that the NAACP and the Urban League should still do what they're doing, but it's our obligation and our responsibility to make sure that we do what we can do to help each and everyone who comes to this country. And we did that. And I'm proud of that piece. But then that was done out of the goodness and the kindness based on my Christian esoteric foundation, which says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love your fellow man, etc. All those things that were preached to me by my parents and by my religious community were the motivators that gave me the strength and the vision and the willingness to make the sacrifice that was necessary in order to embrace our new compatriots from Cuba and from Haiti. But fast forward 2021. The one thing that made me testify before John Conyers' Immigration and Naturalization Committee in Congress was the fact that it never dawned on me the economic impact on my community that the influx of others was going to have if it was not controlled. Our worth was defined. We survived slavery, not because of the fact that those who were in charge of the slaves were compassionate, were humane, but we survived slavery because they could not survive without the sweat of our backs. They could not be rich without the exploitation of us. So we survived not because they were good people, not because they were Christians, not because they felt compassionate to do things. We survived because we had an economic posture that was important to them. And as a result of that, no matter how brutal they became, no matter how inhumane they became in relating to us, they made sure that come Monday morning, enough of us were able to get up and go to the fields because we were the only source of labor that they had. So they had to make sure that at the end of the day, we may not have quote unquote progress, but we survived, not because they were compassionate, but because we had the value that was related to their quality of life continuing to be what they thought it was, their political posture continued to be what they wanted it to be. We survived. And over the years, if we are honest, we have survived, not because of newfound compassion. We have survived, not because we believe that we can survive in spite of them. We have survived because we had value to their survival. And the value is we provided the labor that was needed in order for them to have all the things that they needed to have. When I came here in 1963, every skycap in Miami International Airport looked like me. There were some good jobs. Or you could really send a whole lot of children to college. You could change cars every other year. You were making plenty of money simply because of the fact that you were making money that you did not have to report its totality to IRS because it was tips. You just reported the salary piece, but not the tips piece. And then we've always been one of the tourist meccas of the world. And you go to the shipyards, the cruise lines, you see the longshoremen, and all the longshoremen looked like me. And they had plenty of money every day. And then you would go to the restaurants, 265,000 restaurant seats when I came here. And most of the help in those restaurants looked like me. That's why on Monday, they had Blue Monday, which said very clearly that we have made enough Monday, until we're going to make Monday the holiday for us. The point is that this whole industry, like slavery, was dependent upon us for jobs. That's not true today. We've imported people who are willing to work, forget about what they get paid, but willing to work. And what we have seen is that they get exploited like we were exploited during slavery and segregation. But they don't understand what they must do because they are just happy to be here. just like we were in slavery. We were just happy to be alive. So we figured out what was the appropriate behavior in order to survive, not in order to thrive. But now in 2021, we look at the border and we see tens of thousands, now into the millions of folks who are going to be coming into this country illegally. And they're going to be granted the rights to participate in the process, regardless of their citizenship status. They are going to be used in the new 21st century slave system going forward. And they know that, unlike those of us who say that America is the worst place in the world for us, they know that in America, there's no place like it. In fact, one of the real questions is, if America is still a racist place, and if the racism is based on skin color, then would it make any real sense for the overwhelming majority of the people who are trying to get into America are as black as me? It would seem to me that they would be saying, I'm like Harriet Tubman. I'm not going to a place that makes decisions based on color. Why would I want to risk my life making the trek from abroad, from Bolivia, from other places, to get to a place that makes decisions based on skin color? Well, one of the things that we know about segregation, one of the things that we know about slavery is that when you have economic value, when you have political value, then the color of your skin and the influence that it has on others sort of somehow becomes insignificant. And when you feel beholding to those who put you in a position to eventually make your life better, then you're prepared to play the game until you can be the gamer. So why is it then that this is happening? It is happening because, once again, those who are in power know that they must now create some new Negroes. Those who are in power know that there is a significant attitude amongst us as Negroes, that we are divided based on our willingness to be, quote unquote, herd it into what they want us into, simply because they want us into it. So as we look at these two political parties, they are warring over us. As one party begins to become more attractive to the other group of folks who belong to that party, then that party must do something to maintain its power. And in my judgment, what they've decided to do is to let people in and eventually give them the right to participate in the most important things that we have, and that is to vote, and that is to work. So what do you got here? You got all these jobs. Unemployment is going to be high. You got all these jobs. Unemployment is going to be off the Richter scale. We won't take them because we know what we should be making. They will take them because all they want to do is make it. We have a standard of life that we have experienced since we left 1619. We know something about what is the cost of living and what is realistic and what is not realistic. Therefore, we are not as flexible in being suppressed as we used to be. But other groups don't have that history nor that opportunity. And we saw this. If you can remember when Hurricane Katrina came through, and in New Orleans, the devastation was astronomical. And after it was all over, the work to rebuild New Orleans was greater than ever before. And therefore, the jobs for those inexperienced individuals in New Orleans who were victims of the hurricane, who lost their social service, their restaurant tier jobs, etc., now had an opportunity to get employed rebuilding New Orleans as a result of Katrina. Guess what happened? Tens of thousands of Mexicans came to New Orleans. And while the going wage was $1.65, they were willing to work for 75 cents a dollar. You know what that did? It canceled all of those Black people who were citizens, who were willing to work, who said, we will not work for that. And the boss said, so be it. I just need labor. This is not a civil rights issue for us. This is a survival issue for us. And I'm going to employ those who will work the cheapest. That's what we're going to see. That's what we're going to see. So Black folks who say that I'm not going back to work, I'm going to tell you that the stimulus money is going to run out. I'm going to tell you that the money that you get for the children from the government is going to run out. I'm going to tell you that all of these vacant jobs that you refuse to return to because you're getting all of this free printed up money is going to run out. And I'm going to tell you that by the time you wake up, somebody else who came across the border illegally that has been dispersed into our neighborhoods are going to get it. Now, isn't it strange that tens of thousands of people are coming into this country and they're being dispersed into our cities, not at the invitation of the local government, not at the invitation of those who are in charge locally, but they're just being dispersed, given a ticket, get on the bus, Orlando, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, you go, airplane ticket, hotel space. And when it comes time, who do you think they're going to be loyal to? Who do you think they're going to get favors from? The folks who gave me the opportunity. And nobody should be surprised that things are going to get worse. So I'm suggesting that if we think that things are not what they should be, then those of us who know that they're not what they should be very aggressive about insisting that the current set of circumstances do not carry us back to slavery. The current set of circumstances do not further disenfranchise us. The current set of circumstances should not be seen as a deterrent for us to work hard, plan differently, and be selfish about our survival. The current set of circumstances should not allow anybody to convince us that we are racist we are not sensitive. We are not understanding if we don't support people who are like us or who come under similar circumstances. I am in empathy with anybody who wants to come to this great country called America. But I am also selfish about my future, and I'm not prepared to sacrifice the future of my son, my grandson, or the children of Liberty City because I empathize with the conditions of other folks who look like me, who want to free the same kind of tyranny and injustice that my parents and grandparents had to endure simply because of the color of their skin. So things ain't going to be the same. Inflation is going to hit us harder than ever because, see, once again, many instances we do well because other folks who are doing well empathize with us. So the NAACP, the Urban League, the other Black organizations who are dependent upon the empathy and the sympathy of others to support their plight will learn real soon that if I'm doing bad, no matter how much I think I ought to help you because you're doing bad, I won't be able to help you because I'm doing bad. In other words, we depend upon the largesse of others, and when the largesse of others is no longer in place, then it means that we're not going to get what we used to get. We may have decided that we want to go to work, that we're prepared to work, that the stimulus money has run out. But if there's somebody who's willing to work for less than what they are paying, then the employer is going to hire that person and past transgressions be damned. So we're in a very tight place, without any strategy to move us forward. So one of the things I'm going to offer is I think that we ought to have a summit on the future of Black Dade County. I think the summit ought to be held at Florida Memorial College. I think it ought to be convened by Frederica Wilson, who is the most powerful Black elected official in the state of Florida. I think it ought to be co-sponsored by the Urban League, NAACP, the Miami-Dade Black Chamber of Commerce, and any other Black organization that professes to be concerned about the economic and the political posture of Black folks. It ought to be held at Florida Memorial College, and that we ought to convene it ourselves. I think that the planners and the organizers and the advertisers ought to be us. I think that we should not be so kind as to let others, because of their empathy, take out ads. I think it ought to be a Black conference, a Black soul searching. I think it ought to be held in a month that I don't celebrate called Black History Month. I think that gives us ample time. I think all the ads, all the things that we do, all the food should come from Black vendors. I think it ought to be a soul searching 3 days where we're honest with ourselves about where we are, where we want to go, and how we're going to get there. I think we ought to be proud about it. I think we ought to jump up and shout about it. I think we have no time to moan and groan. I think we ought to be fair enough and honest enough and selfish enough to say that things are changing, things are different. And because things are changing and things are different, we're going to do something about it. That we're not going to sit back and wring our hands and say, oh God, what they going to do? We're going to pick it. We're going to demonstrate. We're going to call them racist. I tell you that would get you a cup of tea and nothing else. That this is about your own political survival, your own economic survival, your own ability to go forward in spite of the circumstances. So yes, things are different. But for those of us who call yourself historians, you will know that if you do an analysis of our history, that in the most difficult times, some way, somehow, some person came up with a solution. Whether it was Frederick Douglass or Martin Luther King or Mary Clyde Bethune, somebody showed the way. I'm suggesting that in 2021, 22, if there is a way, we must shine the light. That if we want to survive this economic tsunami, then it's left up to us. If we're just going to go through it once again and say, well, you know, it's those crazy white folks, well, you know, it's the Haitians, well, you know, it's the Cubans, well, you know, what you know. And I suggest to you that the future will never be anything like it was in the past. It's going to be worse. Because for the first real time, not only do we have no value, but there's somebody in place willing to take our place. And when there's somebody in place willing to take your place, you no longer exist. I want to exist myself. I want my village to exist. And I'm calling on those who believe that an economic summit makes sense to call me, because with that in place, you rise. It's very clear. For the rest of your life, to be the best of your life, then you got to live the rest of your life like colored people live the rest of your life. And if you look at our history, every time there was a moment like the moment that I've just talked about, then some colored person, some colored organization came up with a solution. Whether it was the founding of the NAACP in 1909, or the founding of the urban league movement in 1910, whether it was the creation of the sleeping car porters, whether it was the founding of all of those institutions that historically have made their contribution. We've always been blessed with leadership and opportunity to make something great out of something that is bad. So I'm calling on you to join me in having a conference for our survival beyond the pandemic. This is T. Willard Fair. I'll see you next week.
Keep on, keep going. I need you to keep on going. Keep on going. Keep on going. Keep on going.
We've been hated, degraded, and talked about most of our lives. But we've made it still standing, 'cause they can't destroy what's inside. Black people keep going.